Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Gaming, and a new video on the channel going through the progression of the Tornado Shot character now into the beginning variants of an Omniscience version. What I want to do quickly before we get into the meat and bones of the build is just run a really quick map showcase, because it's hard to demonstrate sort of the clear speed of the build in highlights, mainly because A, my computer's rubbish, and B, I didn't record enough footage. So I tried to, at the beginning of the video, show you what it's like in Legion, Expedition, Harvest, and map bosses. But I'm just going to go and put in a corrupted map. So we've got Legion, Elder, and Expedition. I probably won't finish the whole map. It's just to show you, in a nutshell, what the build's like in terms of clearing and completing all the content. So we'll go in. So I'm going to rush to the boss. I don't have phasing, so it can be a bit awkward because you get stuck. So I mean about my computer.
I put you out of your misery.
So we'll just go down to the boss. I think I've gone the wrong way, have I? No, it must be this way. And then at least if we get any altars spawn, they're going to be useful. And then we'll go back and I'll just do a couple of legions. We've got our first one here. Yeah, my computer's not liking this because I'm recording, hence why I don't record a lot of footage. This isn't the best place for a Legion, but... So hopefully that should pop on its own, because there's definitely no more mobs left yet. Cool. And then you really clear the Legion without even noticing. Obviously with bosses are going to take a little bit longer, but generally... If this didn't have any resistance on it, the map would get cleared super quick and the bosses aren't a problem. But everything else is dead already other than the boss. So I think I saw one up here as well. Nearly killed me. Brilliant. I hate this boss. I probably don't need to dodge him. I'm just doing it because I don't particularly want to die in a showcase. But yeah, that's kind of what the build is like at this stage. And it's got much more investment that can go into it. So I won't waste time picking up all this loot. I'll just jump back into the video and we'll go through the guide. So I brought a few videos out previously showing how to level a bow build, how to really get the beginner gear going, and what it can do on a very, very small budget. And I was actually really enjoying the build. I was going to go onto a different build, but I thought, you know what? I like this playstyle, so I am going to go and push the build a bit further. I'd farmed sort of 20, 25 divines just out and going. So I bought an Omniscience, bought some bases, did a bit of crafting, and I've now got a much better build together. And the thing that really makes the build sing, which we'll go on to when we look at the gear and skill gems, is Awakened Chain. So what I will do quickly is just go into the Ascendancy because it's changed from the previous videos. And I'm just going to explain why I've made those changes. We're going to go into the skill tree later, but I want to cover the Ascendancies off first. So before we were going Ricochet for Chain, Endless Munitions, and then taking Point Blank. Point Blank was decent on bosses, but for mapping it's actually pretty terrible because you get chain, your projectiles go all over the place, and by the time they hit the edge of the screen they're doing very little damage. So what I've done is I've actually added Awakened Chain into the build because I can drop a damage gem because Omniscience gives me a lot more damage. I can then go Far Shot so that the more distance my projectiles travel, the more damage they do. Skills fire 2 additional projectiles, and then these two stay the same. Means I don't have to travel to Point Blank. It's just a ton of damage, but you do need realistically Awakened Chain, or at least Chain, because without any of them, you're not going to have any chain, and the clear is going to feel ass. But yeah, we've slotted Awakened Chain into the build, which is 3 chain, and you can literally just destroy entire screens with a couple of Tornado Shot projectiles. So I can't really go into budget because I've crafted some items. Some I got really lucky with, some I got unlucky with. But I would think to get this build with the gear I've got on, which we'll go through in a bit, is probably a 30 to 40 divine minimum. 30 if you craft it yourself, probably 50 if you wanted to buy the gear outright. But a lot of it you can just craft with, attribute essences. For your Omni gear, you just need to buy the bases. So yeah, I'm not going to put a budget on the build because it is really going to vary depending on what you want to craft yourself and what you want to buy. The issue sometimes with a build like this is if you really want decent gear, it's just not available on trade. Like the quiver I wanted wasn't available, which I'll mention when I go through the gear. But if you want performance that's decent for Tornado Shot up from the budget version, it's a big jump up because there's not really many ways to push that budget version up more than it already was. So you have to add in firstly Omniscience, which when I bought it was 16 Divines. So that takes your 5 Divine build to 21. You then need Omniscience gear. So let's say you add another 10 Divines on top of that. That's 30-ish Divines for the build. And then you want to get a couple of extra arrows into the build on your quiver and your bow. That's another 10 or 20 Divines. So I would say a 50 Divine budget for this build is kind of what we're at the moment. And it is expensive. Like there are builds that perform in terms of damage for 5 Divines, but the clear speed you get on this is absolutely awesome for doing content like Expedition, Legion, Harvest, and just general Ultra mapping. I don't think you can beat this sort of clear speed other than maybe like a Corrupting Fever build, but then you're going to really struggle with boss damage on any kind of low to medium budget. So I would say if you're looking for a build that's super fast, can do pretty much all content in terms of mapping however you want to juice it. I've done like 60 and 80% deli maps with this. I've leveled to 96 doing only corrupted high quant, high pack size T16s. And that's with Legion, Harvest, Expedition. I had Essences in at one point. So it's a super comfy and fairly safe build because you're killing everything before it gets anywhere near you. Even if it doesn't, we've got enough defenses to take a few hits from the majority of monsters. So what we'll do now is go over the gear that I've got on the character. Some of it I'm still looking to optimize some more, which we'll go over when we touch on those items. In terms of the helmet, Black Sun Crest is really, really good for Omniscience builds if you can get a half decent roll. So this one in total percentage attributes has 35%. Anything above sort of 32% is what I was looking for. And I wanted Tornado Shot fires an additional secondary projectile, because for every arrow that we fire, each one of those is going to fire another secondary projectile, which is massive for clear and single target. I think it is a mandatory enchantment for a decent Tornado Shot build. Amulet is obviously crystallized Omniscience. Ignore the allocation of Dreamer for now. I'm going to explain why I've got that in a moment. Doesn't really matter what role you get of Omniscience, because you're going to be having 1500 minimum Omniscience in the build. So even if you got the worst role, Amulet, you'll still be able to get all your attributes sorted out. The quiver, this is one I'm looking to upgrade. And I kind of did this the wrong way, but what I did was purchase an increased projectile speed base, and then just spammed any sort of flat damage essences until I hit bows, fire, an additional arrow. I was hoping for an open suffix so I can craft crit chance and frenzy when you crit. That's easily the best thing you can get on a quiver, and it's really important to the build because it's the way we're going to get frenzy charges. I didn't get it, and I've been trying to roll my replacement quiver for about 10 divines worth of essences. So what we'll do quickly is touch on the end game quiver that I'm looking for. I'm going to link a video that Elishar done looking at a +2 arrow quiver, but the base is a 20-25 divines, and I don't want to spend that sort of money till I've got my headhunter. So what I've done is purchase one with fractured increased damage with bows. The reason I've done that instead of projectile speed is it's a prefix, so I want to leave as many suffixes free as I can because I need to roll additional arrow. So what I'm doing is spamming deafening essences. I'm totally out now, so deafening or shrieking essences of dread because that gives projectile speed. And I'm basically spamming these until I hit bows, fire, an additional arrow. And then I need it to have an open suffix to get that crit chance in. But before you do that, what you can do is scour this to free up your prefixes. So you do suffixes cannot be changed. Scour, you've then got your increased projectile speed, your +1 arrow, and then nothing on the prefixes. What you can then do is craft cannot roll attack mods and then slam it twice with exalts. You're going to guarantee to get damage with bows, but we already have that fractured. So there's only one result that can remain, and that is life. If you get a half decent life roll, you stick with it. You then craft your crit chance, you then slam again, you've got a 6 mod quiver that's really, really good. The reason I'm trying to craft it is there wasn't one on trade that was good enough for what I wanted, which is why I'm having to craft it myself. I've been really, really unlucky. I think the odds of hitting the arrow with your essence is about 140 essences, and I've hit the mod 6 times. It's always had 3 suffixes. Only option is to annul. Every time I've done it, it hasn't removed the junk mod. So I'm probably at least 10 divines into this quiver, and at the moment I'm still stuck with the base. But in terms of the stats you want, damage of bows, life, fires an additional arrow, projectile speed, and then crafted crit. If you can find one on trade for sort of 10 to 15 divines, I'd recommend buying it because you might get unlucky like me and spend a fortune and still not be left with a quiver. But the one I've got is absolutely fine. If this had the crit chance on it, this would be amazing. It doesn't, unfortunately. But that's kind of what I'm looking to do with the quiver. The rings, I've just bought fractured bases with one type of attribute. And then I've rolled intelligent essences until I hit something decent. This has only got 2 attributes, but it's got decent life, all resistances, and an open prefix to craft non-challenge skills, which is really, really good. These 2 non-craft are pretty much mandatory if you want a comfortable experience. And then the second ring, haven't got life on it, but I hit triple attributes with my essence. And then I thought, you know what? Life's not too much of an issue. I only get up to 55. So again, I've just crafted non-channeling skills. On both of these, you obviously want to get the attribute modifiers on them to boost that up. Now the bow, if you're looking GG and you're doing an Ellie build, you want like a tri-Ellie bow with fires 2 additional arrows, crit, attack speed. It's going to be super, super expensive. All I did was buy a fractured base with the additional arrow, and then I basically just spammed any essences that I had that either gave high lightning damage, high cold damage, high fire damage, or attack speed. The idea was to try and hit something half decent and craft crit. As it turned out, I hit this when I was rolling with Essences of Zeal, which is pretty decent. So it is T4 cold, T2 lightning, crafted fire, bows fire additional arrow, attack speed, and crit chance. Essentially, you're looking for something around 900 LE DPS with crit chance and bows fire and additional arrow. Again, this can take hundreds and hundreds of essences to roll. So I would look on trade. If there's anything for sort of 10 to 20 divines, I would purchase the item. The gloves are the same gloves I had before. They're a fractured attack speed base. And I basically rolled with the chance to avoid being stunned. Essences, I know I need accuracy somewhere on my gear because at Omni you are going to be short of accuracy. I hit this, which is pretty decent, so I've just crafted accuracy. But in terms of what you're looking for, if you want to be stun immune, you do need that on the gloves. And which you roll with Essences of Scorn, I believe. Yeah, Essences of Scorn. Fractured attack speed base, because that obviously helps our DPS. And then you're looking for as much life as you can get. For the implicits, I've gone for chance to suppress spell damage because I don't have it on the rest of my gear. And I needed the 6% cap. And then I've gone Intimidate on hit. The boots, I have not really changed other than the implicits from the budget version. This is essentially spammed with Essences of Loathing. Because I want avoid elemental ailments. Needed it to be 30%. And then I've crafted avoid ailments and action speed as the implicits. Now, depending what you get on gear, you might need to craft different levels on this. So I've ended up having to push the avoid ailments up to exceptional to get there without having to get anything else on my gear other than a craft on the chest. But really what you're looking for here is, yeah, 55 to 60% avoid ailments is perfect. And then anything else decent you can get on the item. The belt is a synthesized dexterity belt. You can have dex in or strength. It doesn't matter. It all just adds to omniscience. And then you roll with either dexterity essences or intelligence essences. The reason being is intelligence and dexterity can't roll naturally on a belt. So if you rolled with strength, that's all you're going to get. So you have to roll with dex or intelligence. And I was basically spamming it until I got something that I liked. With omniscience builds, you have to really balance a lot. Mana can sometimes be difficult. Accuracy can be. So what I was looking for on this was life, 2 attributes at least, a resistance, and then space to craft mana. As it turned out, I got LE damage with attacks as well, which is awesome. So I'm really, really happy with this belt. At some point, if I farm enough currency, it'll be replaced with a headhunter. And then the body armor is really just a rare body armor. If you really want to go expensive, you can try and roll with like mana reservation efficiency essences. So maybe get a fractured base first, or something like fractured spell suppression or big life. Then use your mana reservation essences. And that's probably something I will look to do, but I want to get the other gear sorted out first. So all I was looking for was big life, resistances, chaos resistance, and then an open prefix to craft elemental ailments. And I needed to keep recrafting this until I hit 24%, because that then puts me at 100%. For the implicits, I've gone determination effect for a bit of defenses, and then non-cursed auras just for a general buff to all of our auras. For flasks, at the moment I'm just running a Jade Flask, Granite Flask, and a Crit Flask, and then a Quicksilver. Now, on these 3 flasks, I've got use when full, just so I don't have to worry about spamming them, and then I just use the Quicksilver Flask every time it runs out, but I've got one with a 9-second duration. I spam it way too much, but this is really, really good for mapping. What you could do, because this build runs a Brutal Restraint, if you didn't want to run that, which means you probably can't get stun immune, swap this for a Silver Flask, and then instead of your Brutal Restraint, you'd put in an Inspired Learning. That's really, really good for mapping, but my goal is to get a Headhunter to put on the build, so I'm not bothering with the Inspired Learning at the moment, but that is also a really good option. So in terms of links, I'll go through all the skills that I use in this particular setup. The reason I've only got a 5 link on my bow is a 6th link would add some single target damage. Because I'm not bossing, my single target damage is ample enough for map bosses. And having just 4 links as support means it doesn't cost any mana. So we can see here, if I go and spam this, my mana doesn't go down, but I get my Gathering Wind up to 10. So it means on a boss, for example, or on a harvest or anything like that, I could just spam these, wait for the monsters to spawn, and then I've automatically got my 10 Gale Force, which will then stay up because I'm using my bow attack. So the 5 link I'm using is Ballista Totem with Inspiration. Then we're using Tornado Shot, obviously, and then GMP and Focus Ballista. In here, I've slotted one of my Aura Gems, which is Precision. In the helmet, now I'm running Herald of Ice on this build because I wanted a bit more explosions. I wanted it to look pretty. I wanted it to look cool. Let's be honest, it doesn't do a ton, but I wanted to fit it into the build. So I'm running Determination, Enlighten level 3, but it gets pushed up to 4 because of the helmet, and then Grace and Herald of Ice. And that's what I'm fitting in there. And that's the reason for this allocating Dreamer here. It's either allocate 2 points on the tree to get mana, which I might do now I'm level 96, or allocate something to give me mana. And also, importantly, this gives reduced mana cost of skills. So this is basically the same as running Divergent Inspiration. It's 10% reduced mana cost of skills, but those gems are about 2 to 3x. I thought, you know what? I need mana. Reduced cost of skills is super comfy, so I'm going to allocate it. And if you want to do this setup, it's something I'd recommend doing. Like, yes, you're going to lose maybe 7% DPS from not having a damage mod allocated on the amulet, but it just means you can run all the auras without having to do too much fiddling around. So the 6 link I'm actually going for, now I've got a white socket for a reason, which I'll come on to. So the 6 link is Tornado Shot, Increased Crit Damage, GMP, Inspiration, Trinity, and then Awakened Chain. The reason I'm going Awakened Chain is because we're not taking the Chain node in the passive tree in terms of Ascendancy, because I want to go Long Shot, and you need Long Shot plus 2 arrows. The Mark Ascendancy is too good to give up, and obviously Tailwind is as well. So I've given up Chain and then replaced it by getting this gem. It makes clear amazing, like 1 arrow that you fire, which then fires like 8 or 9 arrows, then all the secondary projectiles, then they will chain plus 3 times. You just clear a whole screen. It's really, really good. The reason I've got it white is if I did decide I wanted to boss, I can just swap this for LE damage with attacks, and I've got enough damage to do the majority of the bosses, but I don't plan on doing that, so it's not really something that's necessary. The gloves got a Molten Shell with increased duration and cast and damage taken. Because of all the mana cost bits that I've got, it costs 9 mana. And I have 55 and my skill's hard to use any, so that's always going to proc. And then I've just got a Flame Dash for my movement skill. And then lastly, I'll go on to the Mark. So it's Sniper's Mark, Live Tap, because even with all these reduced mana costs, I'm not going to have enough mana to cast this comfortably. And then Mark on hit support. And then just a Vile Haste in here to use on bosses. And that's the gem setup. So we'll move on to the skill tree. It's obviously changed a lot from the budget version. At the moment, I don't have any form of charge generation. I don't run Blood Rage. I don't have any power or endurance charges, which is why I'm really keen to get that Quiver crafted, because then I've got a generation for frenzy charges on both bosses and when mapping. Now I need to rejig this tree a little bit because I've leveled up a bit more than I had before. So what I could probably do is drop this node here and this more projectile speed here. Maybe take these mana nodes, which also has a bit of strengthening, drop this, And then it means I can maybe get another mod allocated. But for now, this is the tree. I'm still going with Lionized Fall because the damage is just really good. Like I looked at rejigging it to get rid of it, get some cluster jewels. And the damage isn't really that different. This is nice and cheap to get it going. So I've just left it as it is. So just to point out some important things, this is the Brutal Restraint, but if you wanted to, you could go for an Inspired Learning. So this is the Brutal Restraint jewel that I'm using to get Onslaught. And I'm also using it because you get stuff like plus 5% Dexterity, which is really nice. Proj damage. Again, Alchemist Genius is pretty nice. But what I'm mainly aiming for is this Onslaught on kill here, and then 20% chance to avoid being stunned, because that caps me off at my stun avoidance. If you wanted to just forgo the stun, maybe get Onslaught crafted on boots on kill, you could put an Inspired Learning in here. There's not really much to go through. I'll just run through the masteries. Like the tree is pretty self-explanatory. It's bow, life, and crit. So we're taking 2 life masteries, the 10% increased and the plus 50. In the dagger mastery here, we're taking Culling Strike, which will then apply to the bow attacks that we do. It just means I don't need to take these nodes here just to get coal. And then here, I'm taking Mana and Life Leech because it's 2 points to get it here. It's 1 point there. Critical Strike chance increased by chance to suppress spell damage. Precision Mastery Reservation, you will need. Grace Mastery Reservation, you will need. Here we're taking auras have 10% increased effect on you. It's not a massive node, so until you level up a bit more, if you needed to drop nodes, this one is obviously not needed. This one isn't needed. And probably this one isn't needed. It's just a nice to have. I'm also taking this Suppression Mastery where I get 12% if I've got it on boots, helmet, and gloves. Because I have like 6% on my gear, so the rest needs to come from the tree. What would probably be an upgrade for me would be to get a Fractured Spell Suppression chest. Maybe I can drop this node and maybe even these if we can maybe get it somewhere else. But at the moment, I just want to build it up to get it going so I can farm a Headhunter. Then I'll look at kind of min-maxing each part. But that's it for the masteries. The only other thing you'll definitely need is a Replica Conqueror's Efficiency to again lower the mana cost of our main skill. So in terms of content, I've tested loads of stuff. I've tested some fairly juice lakes. I'm doing some Legion farming, Delirium farming, and the build performs really, really well. As I'm obviously rarely dying because I've hit 96. Now I am 96. I'm probably going to start really juicing, and then I am likely to start dying if I take like, you know, Eldritch Gaze and stuff like that. But the build is super, super fun. I was enjoying it anyway, but just being able to add chain into the build because of the extra damage Omniscience gives us is just amazing. Also, not having to run a damage aura means we're pretty tanky. Like, the defenses aren't amazing, but we are quite well layered. So we have stun avoidance, which is absolutely feels brilliant in mapping, not to get stunned. Obviously got our ailment avoidance here. We are spell suppressed capped. We're just at 75% resistances. Managed to get my chaos up to sort of 13%. I'm happy with that. And then in terms of defenses, without any flask active, we've got just under 8k armor and just over 12k evasion. Put our flasks on, 15k armor and just under 20k evasion. And it feels super, super nice. I've probably ran 60 corrupted Junes doing Legion, Harvest, Delirium, Expedition, and I've died maybe once, I think, and got to 96. So it feels super, super comfy and safe, mainly because we've got such low mana cost. We can just spam skills pretty much. And then everything off screen, because we've got really good projectile speed, is just going to get obliterated with the chain. Feels really, really nice. In terms of Pantheons, I have been super lazy. So I'm running Burning Ground and I'm running Lunaris, but I really need to actually pull my finger out and get the rest of these done. This is definitely the one I recommend for mapping. You get extra Phys reduction, extra movement speed, chance to avoid projectiles, reduce daily damage taken, and avoid projectiles that are chained, which is quite nice because we use ballistas, so enemy projectiles can chain off those and kill you. Now, Bandits is obviously killing all. Each skill point is really, really helpful for this build, and the small amount of crit multi that we get is not that handy. If you struggle to get resistance capped with your Omniscience gear, you could go Alira, because that gives you, I think it's 15% all res, some mana regen, and some crit multi. It's not the worst option, because it might make gearing a little bit easier. Now I wanted to talk about why I've built it in an Omni Trinity version rather than going the cold conversion. And it's mainly because I don't really think that build is that much better until you get maybe a double inspired learning or a headhunter. All of headhunter buffs scale in terms of damage and mostly Phys as. So having like an Omni build doesn't benefit that much from the offensive buffs that you get from enemies. But Omniversion is just much cheaper to build. The bow is so much cheaper to craft. And you've easily got enough damage to do most of the content that you want to do. Yes, I think obviously a Phys conversion is better because you can scale it much higher, but you can scale a Trinity version high enough on a much lower budget to get it doing all the content that you want it to do. Now I've got this build set up, I probably will go to like a hatred conversion version of the build, but it's going to cost an absolute ton of money. Like I'm going to need God knows how much, 40 to 50 divines to craft the bow. There's a few other bits I need to look at as well. Some of my gear is going to have to be changed. So it's not something I want to look at yet. Once I add a headhunter into the build, if that feels super comfy, I'm not going to bother. I don't need it to do more than it does at the moment. That's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.